this sanctuary, singing those joyful Easter hymns, looking at the beautiful cross filled with flowers, smelling the fragrant lilies, and hearing a sermon that perhaps some of you still remember. Frankly, it is the way that Easter is supposed to be, a time to celebrate the essence of our faith, a time to gather as a community and to share in this good news. But as we know, that was not the experience for everyone on that Easter Sunday. Sadly, the scene was very different for Christians who gathered in Sri Lanka. Just like us, they had gathered that day to sing those joyful Easter hymns, to celebrate the essence of their faith, the resurrection of Jesus. However, their joy quickly turned to terror as suicide bombers entered into 3 churches and took the lives of those who had gathered for worship. Along with the blasts that devastated several hotels in Sri Lanka, more than 250 people were killed and more than 500 were injured. On that dark day, Easter Sunday reverted back to the horror of Good Friday. In the past few weeks, as I have reflected on that tragedy, I have found myself asking the question, is there anything we could say that could offer them hope at this time? I confess, in the midst of incredible evil, our words seem so inadequate. And while our words are inadequate, we also have God's words. And God's words are more than adequate to speak to us in our times of pain, to offer us comfort in our times of grief, and to offer us hope in our times of despair. In our psalm lesson for this morning, the 23rd Psalm, we discover that there are words within them that contain some of the most meaningful words that we are able to hear at such a time. Words that have brought comfort to God's people for millennia. Words that we hear at almost every funeral we ever attend. In light of the tragedy in Sri Lanka, let us look once more at this beloved psalm and let us consider what these ancient words might say to us today. As you already know, King David begins with this simple statement: "The Lord is my shepherd." The image of a shepherd is a fairly common one in Scripture. And yet, it is pretty foreign to most of us today. I don't believe that I have ever met a professional shepherd in my life. Still, we have a pretty good sense of what a shepherd's primary job is. And over the years, I have learned a few things about sheep. Specifically, sheep are an animal that needs to be tended. Sheep are not one of the more intelligent beasts in the animal kingdom. What Jesus shares in the parable of the lost sheep quite accurate, as sheep are quite prone to wander off. And they are also one of the more defenseless, helpless animals that you can find, unable to protect themselves from outside forces. And so, when King David asserts that the Lord is our shepherd, he is by inference telling us that we are sheep. Now, given what I have just shared, this is probably not a very flattering comparison. But flattering or not, it is our reality. No doubt, we don't like to think of ourselves as helpless or defenseless, but we are. A fact that was reinforced in Sri Lanka 3 weeks ago. We are not in control as much as we might like to think. We are far more vulnerable than we care to admit. But as King David reminds us, there is also something very comforting in this image. Because we are not deserted sheep. We are a sheep who have a shepherd. Indeed, a good shepherd, Jesus, who laid down his life for us, who reminds us that we are never beyond the bounds of his care, not even in the midst of the worst of human tragedies. Later on in the psalm, David tells us, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. The opening portion of this song, or this verse, can also be translated, though I walk through the darkest valleys. Few valleys were darker than the ones those Christians in Sri Lanka walked through. On Easter, they will never forget, for all the wrong reasons. A holy sanctuary turned into a defiled place. I can't even begin to fathom what that horrendous scene must have been like, nor do I want to. But in that dark valley, in the midst of that unspeakable evil, King David reminds us of something that we sometimes struggle to believe, but something that we must fiercely cling to. They were not alone. Their good shepherd was with them. In fact, their good shepherd once walked through the darkest of valleys for all of us. Jesus uses this very image when he tells us, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And that is precisely what Jesus did. He walked through the bitterness of personal suffering. He walked through the valley of God-forsakenness. Indeed, he walked through the very door of death. For the people in Sri Lanka, for us, in our times of trial, may we as well draw comfort in the knowledge that we are never alone. Our good shepherd, who himself walked through the darkest of valleys, walks with us in our dark valleys. And he can lead us out. King David ends his inspirational psalm with these words, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. One of the assurances of this Easter season, one of the great promises of the Christian faith, is that death is not the final word for us. For those in Sri Lanka who mourn the deaths of their loved ones, there is a hope that they can cling to in the midst of their sorrow. They will one day dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Indeed, Jesus himself uses that very same image when speaking to his disciples. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. And Jesus promises to prepare a place for his followers so that where he is, they will be also. And while the specifics of our eternal home are beyond our comprehension, in the book of Revelation, John gives us at least a glimpse. It will be vastly different from what we know here. It will not include any of the pain or heartache that we are acquainted with in this world. And it will be a place where we bask in the presence of our God. As John writes in our second lesson for today, for the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to the springs of the water of life. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Yes, we live with the greatest of hopes. The Good Shepherd who leads us through this life and through our dark valleys is the same shepherd who will be there to greet us in heaven, where he will guide us to the springs of the water of life. But for now, we continue to live in this broken world. May we continue to stand in solidarity with the Christians in Sri Lanka, praying for them in this time of great loss, praying that they will be able to return to corporate worship at some point without fear, and praying that they will be comforted by their Good Shepherd, the one who guides them, who leads them through the dark valleys, and the one who will eventually bring them to green pastures. Amen. Amen. Our hymn of the day is hymn number 764.